The morning air in the Galactic Academy felt cold against the skin as 23 students sat in the large classroom. Their desks were arranged in perfect rows, and each student looked different from the others. Some had blue skin with 4 arms. Others looked like walking crystals that made soft humming sounds. A few had big compound eyes like insects. In the back corner, Kim Day sat quietly, the only human in the class. Professor Velthera walked to the front of the room. She was tall and had 8 long tentacles instead of arms. Her skin was purple and covered in small spots that glowed when she was thinking. She picked up a data pad and looked at the class with her large black eyes. "Today I will tell you about your final test," she said. Her voice came through a small device that helped everyone understand her words. "This test will decide if you pass or fail this class." The students became very quiet. Some of them started to tap their fingers or claws on their desks. The crystal students hummed a little louder, which meant they were worried. "You will go to a planet called Vorthak Prime," the professor continued. "This planet is very dangerous. We have kept it closed to visitors for good reasons. The animals there are not like the safe creatures you have studied before." She pressed a button, and a big screen showed pictures of dark, scary planet. The trees were purple and black. The sky looked red and angry. Strange shadows moved between the trees in the pictures. "Your job is to study the Class 7 apex predator that lives there," Professor Velthera said. "It is called a shadow maw. These creatures are the most dangerous hunters on the planet. They are very smart and very deadly." A Zenthari student named Crixtau raised one of her 4 hands. Her compound eyes looked worried. "Professor, how big are these creatures?" "An adult shadow maw stands 12 feet tall," the professor answered. "They have claws that can cut through metal. Their teeth are as sharp as knives. They can speak to each other with their minds. Most important of all, they have never been friendly to any other species. Ever." The room became even quieter. Some students looked at each other with fear in their eyes. "You will have 72 hours on the planet," Professor Velthera continued. "You must watch these creatures and write down what you see. Take pictures if you can. Collect samples of plants and soil. But remember the most important rule: never, ever get close to a shadow maw. Watch from far away. Use your tools to see them, but do not approach them." She walked around the room, her tentacles waving as she spoke. "In the past, trained soldiers have gone to this planet. Many of them never came back. The ones who did come back told stories of creatures that hunt in groups and show no mercy." Kim Day listened to every word, but did not look scared like the other students. He had read about many dangerous animals on Earth. He had grown up in the mountains where bears and wild boars lived. His grandfather had taught him that most animals only attacked when they were scared or protecting their babies. "Each of you will get a survival pack," the professor said. "Inside you will find food for 4 days, a water maker, a sleeping bag, basic medical supplies, and communication equipment. You will also get cameras and sensors to help you study the creatures from a safe distance." A crystal student made a sound like breaking glass, which meant it was asking a question. "What if we cannot find the shadow maws?" "You will find them," Professor Velthera said with certainty. "They will find you first. These creatures can sense other living things from very far away. They are always hunting. Your job is to stay alive while you study them." She moved to her desk and picked up a small device. "This is an emergency beacon. If you are in terrible danger, press the red button. A rescue ship will come for you, but using it means you fail the test automatically." The professor looked at each student carefully. "Some of you are thinking this test is too dangerous. You are right to think that, but you are in the advanced xenobiology program. After you graduate, you will study the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. This test will prepare you for that work." Dave raised his hand. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning," the professor answered. "Tonight you should rest and check your equipment. Make sure everything works properly. Your life may depend on it." She pressed another button, and the screen showed a picture of a dropship. You will be taken to different parts of the planet. Each student will work alone. This is not a team project. You must prove that you can survive and study dangerous creatures by yourself. As the class ended, students began talking quietly among themselves. Most of them looked worried or scared. Some were already planning how to stay as far away from the shadow maws as possible. Kim Day gathered his things and walked toward the door. He was not scared, but he was very curious. He wondered what these shadow maws were really like and why everyone was so afraid of them. The dropship left Kim Day alone in a clearing surrounded by tall purple trees. The engine noise faded away until only strange forest sounds remained. He looked around at his new home for the next 3 days. Everything looked different from Earth. The leaves were dark purple and silver. The grass felt soft but made crackling sounds when he walked on it. The air smelled like metal and flowers mixed together. Day put on his backpack and checked his equipment. His scanner beeped softly, showing him where other life forms were moving in the forest. Most of the signals were small, probably insects or small animals. But he was looking for something much bigger. He walked for 2 hours, following animal trails through the thick forest. His feet made soft sounds on the strange ground. Sometimes he stopped to take pictures of unusual plants or to collect soil samples. Everything was quiet except for the gentle wind in the trees. Then his scanner started beeping faster. Something big was moving nearby. Day looked at the small screen and saw a large red dot. It was not moving much, which was strange for a dangerous predator. He followed the signal deeper into the forest. The trees became thicker and darker. Purple vines hung down like curtains. Day pushed through them carefully, trying not to make noise. His heart was beating fast, but he was excited more than scared. This might be his first chance to see a real shadow maw. He heard a sound that made him stop walking. It was not the growl or roar he expected. It was a sad whimpering noise, like a hurt animal calling for help. The sound went straight into his mind and made him feel sorry for whatever was making it. Day moved toward the sound very slowly. He pushed aside some large leaves and saw something that made him forget to breathe. A young shadow maw was lying on its side in a small clearing. It was trapped under a big piece of broken metal that looked like part of an old spaceship. The creature was huge, even though it was not fully grown. Its body was covered in black scales that looked like armor. It had 6 red eyes and a long snout full of sharp teeth. But right now it looked hurt and scared. Dark blue blood was coming from cuts on its side where the metal was pressing down. The creature's red eyes looked at Day when he appeared, but it did not try to attack. It just made that sad whimpering sound again. Day's communication device suddenly came to life with worried voices from his classmates. They could see everything through the cameras on his equipment. Day, what are you doing? Lee Hanna's voice was full of panic. Get away from that thing right now. It will kill you, shouted Park Jean from wherever he was hiding. The professor said never to get close. But Day was not listening to their voices. He was looking into the creature's 6 red eyes. They did not look evil or hungry like the professor had said. They looked scared and in pain. The creature's mind seemed to touch his thoughts gently, like a whisper asking for help. It's okay, Day said softly, taking off his backpack. I'm going to help you. The shadow maw stopped whimpering and watched him carefully. Its red eyes followed every move he made. Day could feel something strange in his mind, like warm fingers touching his thoughts. The creature was trying to understand what he wanted to do. Day looked at the heavy piece of metal. It was part of an old mining probe that must have crashed here long ago. The metal was pressing down on the creature's leg inside. He could see that the shadow maw had been trying to get free for a long time. The ground around it was torn up from its struggles. This is going to hurt a little, Day told the creature. But I need to move this metal to help you. He put his hands under the edge of the broken metal and pushed up with all his strength. It was very heavy, but he managed to lift it a few inches. The shadow maw understood what he was doing and carefully pulled his leg out from under the metal. When Day let the metal fall back down, the creature rolled away and tried to stand up. It was wobbly and weak, but it managed to get to its feet. Now, Day could see how truly big it was. Even as a young one, it was taller than him. Its head was almost touching the tree branches above them. The shadow maw looked down at Day and made a soft rumbling sound that felt friendly in his mind. Then it did something that surprised him. It lowered its big head and gently touched his shoulder with its snout, like a dog saying thank you. You're welcome, Day said, smiling. He opened his medical kit. and took out some bandages. "Let me help clean those cuts." His communication device was going crazy with voices from his classmates, but he turned it off. Right now, nothing was more important than helping this hurt creature. The shadow maw seemed to understand and sat down carefully so Day could reach its wounds. As he worked, Day felt the creature's mind touching his thoughts again. This time it felt warm and grateful, not scary at all. By the morning of the second day, Kim Day woke up to find a young shadow maw sleeping curled around a small tent, like a giant guard dog. The creature had stayed with him all night, its warm body keeping the cold forest air away. When Day opened his tent and crawled out, 6 red eyes opened and looked at him with what could only be called happiness. "Good morning to you, too," Day said, patting the creature's massive head. The shadow maw made a deep rumbling sound that felt like purring in his mind. 3 kilometers away, his classmates were watching everything through their long-distance cameras and sensors. They could not believe what they were seeing. "This is impossible," Crixtal said to herself, adjusting her equipment again. Her 4 hands moved quickly over the controls, tried to make sure her cameras were working right. Shadow maws do not make friends with other species. They eat other species. Through her telescope, she watched Day share his breakfast with the massive creature. The human broke his food bars into pieces and held them out. The shadow maw took them very gently in its huge mouth, being careful not to hurt Day with its sharp teeth. "The professors will think our equipment is broken," said Park Jean into his recording device. He was hiding behind a large rock, too scared to get any closer. No one will believe this video. But the strangest thing was still to come. After breakfast, Day found a long stick on the ground. He picked it up and threw it across the clearing. The shadow maw watched the stick fly through the air, then looked back at Day with a confused expression. "Go get it," Day said, pointing at the stick. "Fetch." The creature tilted its head, trying to understand. Day walked over to the stick, picked it up, and brought it back. Then he threw it again and made encouraging gestures. This time the shadow maw understood. It ran across the clearing with surprising grace for such a large creature and picked up the stick in its mouth. Then it brought it back to Day, its tail wagging like an enormous dog. "Good boy," Day said, taking the stick and throwing it again. The shadow maw's eyes seemed to sparkle with joy as it ran after it. Lee Hannah was watching this through her binoculars from a safe distance of 5 kilometers. She turned on her communicator and called the other students. "Are you all seeing this? The human is playing fetch with a Class 7 apex predator. I see it, but I do not understand it," replied a crystal student named Chalera. Her humming sounds showed she was very confused. "According to all our studies, this should not be possible." What the students did not know was that shadow maws were pack animals. They lived in family groups and took care of each other. The young creature that Day had helped was used to having companions to play with and share food with. When its pack was not around, Day had become its new family. The creature, which Day had started calling Shadow, could sense his emotions through its telepathic abilities. It knew that Day was not afraid of it. It could feel his kindness and his genuine care. For a species that valued loyalty and friendship above everything else, this was like speaking a language they understood perfectly. By afternoon, Shadow was following Day everywhere he went. When Day stopped to collect plant samples, Shadow would sit nearby and watch him work. When Day took pictures of interesting rocks, Shadow would bring him more rocks that looked similar. The creature was trying to help in the only way it knew how. "Look at this," Day said, showing Shadow a pretty blue flower he had found. "Isn't it beautiful?" Shadow looked at the flower, then disappeared into the forest. A few minutes later, it came back, carrying a whole branch covered in the same blue flowers. It dropped the branch at Day's feet and made that happy rumbling sound. "Thank you," Day said, scratching behind Shadow's ear ridges. The creature leaned into his touch and closed its eyes with pleasure. When it was time to make camp for the night, Shadow helped gather wood for a fire. The creature could not understand why Day needed fire, but could sense that the human wanted dry wood, so it brought him the best pieces it could find. As night fell, Day sat by a small fire while Shadow lay beside him. The creature's head was resting on Day's lap, and Day was gently stroking the smooth scales on its neck. Shadow was making soft, contented sound that felt warm and happy in Day's mind. "You're not a monster at all, are you?" Day said quietly. "You're just lonely." Shadow's mental voice touched his thoughts, and for a moment Day could feel what the creature felt. There was gratitude for being helped, happiness at having a friend, and something that felt like love. But there was also something else, something that made Day look up at the dark forest around them. In the distance, deep howling sounds echoed through the night. Shadows had lifted, and its ears perked up toward the sound. The creature's emotions suddenly became excited and nervous at the same time. More howls answered the first ones, coming from different directions. They were getting closer. Shadow stood up and looked at Day with an expression that seemed to say, "My family is coming." The ground began to shake with heavy footsteps. Kim Day felt the vibrations through his boots as something very large moved through the forest toward them. Shadow stood up and made excited whimpering sounds, looking back and forth between Day and the dark trees around them. The howling sounds were getting louder and closer. They came from all directions now, surrounding the small clearing where Day had made his camp. Each howl was answered by another, creating a conversation that Day could not understand, but Shadow clearly could. Emergency extraction needed now. Choi Soo screamed into her communicator from her hiding spot 10 kilometers away. She was watching everything through her long-distance cameras. "The human is going to die. Send the rescue ships right away." But there was no time for rescue ships. The first adult Shadow Maw stepped out of the forest and into the firelight. Day had thought Shadow was big, but this creature was enormous. It stood 12 feet tall, with muscles that bulged under its armored scales. Scars covered its dark hide, telling stories of many battles. Its 6 red eyes glowed like burning coals in the firelight. When it opened its mouth, teeth as long as kitchen knives gleamed in the darkness. Then another Shadow Maw appeared from a different direction. Then another. Soon 12 massive creatures stood at the edge of the clearing, forming a circle around Day and Shadow. Each one was bigger and more frightening than the last. The adult Shadow Maws looked at Day with expressions he could not read. Their mental voices pressed against his mind like a heavy weight. He felt their curiosity, their caution, and something that might have been anger. Why was this small, strange creature with their young pack member? Shadow ran to the largest Shadow Maw, clearly its mother, and began making excited chirping sounds. The mother lowered her massive head and nuzzled her child gently. Then Shadow did something that surprised everyone watching through cameras from far away. The young creature ran back to Day and gently pushed him toward the pack with its snout. Shadow's mental voice touched the minds of all the adult Shadow Maws, explaining what had happened. The young one told him about being trapped under the metal, about the pain, and about the small creature that had freed it and taken care of its wounds. Shadow used concepts that roughly meant friend who heals and pack kin chosen to describe Day. In Shadow Maw culture, these were very important ideas. Someone who helped a pack member in danger was considered family, no matter what species they were. The alpha female, Shadow's mother, walked slowly toward Day. Each step made the ground tremble. Her red eyes studied him carefully as her mental presence explored his thoughts and emotions. Day stood very still, knowing that his life depended on what happened in the next few seconds. The huge creature lowered her head until her snout was inches from Day's face. He could feel her warm breath and smell the scent of the forest on her scales. For a moment that felt like forever, predator and human looked into each other's eyes. Then the alpha female did something that made all the watching students gasp in shock. She gently bumped her snout against Day's chest, the same way she had greeted Shadow earlier. It was the Shadow Maw way of welcoming someone into the pack. What happened next was even more amazing. The other adult Shadow Maws began approaching Day one by one. Each creature sniffed him carefully, then gave him the gentle head bump greeting. Soon Day was surrounded by 12 enormous predators, all treating him like a friend. "This is impossible," Professor Velthera said from a monitoring station on the orbiting ship. She was watching the live video feed with her mouth open in shock. Shadow Maws do not adopt other species. They are territorial hunters who kill anything that enters their space. But the pack was doing much more than just accepting Day. They began bringing him gifts. The first gift was a cluster of beautiful crystals that glowed with soft blue light. An adult male placed them carefully at Day's feet, then stepped back and waited to see his reaction. "Thank you," Day said, picking up the crystals. "They're beautiful." The Shadow Maw's rumbling sound of pleasure told Day he had given the right response. Soon other pack members were bringing more gifts. Strange fruits that looked like jewels, smooth stones worn by water, even small prey animals that they had caught for him to eat. The alpha female began grooming Day's hair with her massive claws, being incredibly careful not to hurt him. Other pack members took turns sniffing him and gently touching him with their snouts. They were covering him with their scent, marking him as one of their own. Shadow was clearly happy to see his new friend accepted by his family. The young creature kept running between Day and the other pack members, making excited sounds and showing off his human to everyone. As the night went on, the pack settled down around Day's fire. The huge creatures curled up on the ground like enormous cats, with Day and Shadow in the center of the group. The alpha female lay closest to Day, her body creating a warm wall between him and the cold forest. From orbit, the professors stared at their screens in amazement. According to every scientific study they had ever read, what they were seeing was completely impossible. But there it was, happening right in front of them. The humans, it seemed, had done it again. The extraction shuttles arrived on the morning of the third day to find something that made the pilots rub their eyes in disbelief. Kim Day walked out of the forest carrying his backpack, but he was not alone. Shadow walked beside him, and behind them came 12 massive adult Shadow Maws, moving like a parade of gentle giants. The other students were already waiting at the pickup point, standing far away from where they expected Day to appear. When they saw the pack of enormous creatures following him like loyal dogs, some of them dropped their equipment in shock. "Is he controlling them somehow?" whispered Park Jean, hiding behind the landing shuttle. "No," said Crixtal, checking her readings one more time. "They're following him by choice. The mental scans show they are happy and calm." Day's backpack was full of things that made the professors very excited. He had samples of shadow maw scales that had been shed naturally. He had recordings of their mental conversations. He had detailed observations of their hunting methods, their family structures, and their social behaviors. Most importantly, he had proof that they were not mindless killers, but intelligent beings with complex emotions. The pack had given him these things freely, understanding that he wanted to share knowledge about them with others. The alpha female had even allowed him to examine her cubs, showing him how shadow maw families raise their young with love and patience. The creatures wanted to help me learn about them. Day explained to the shuttle pilot. They understand that knowledge brings respect, and respect brings protection. Shadow refused to leave Day's side when the shuttles prepared to take off. The young creature made sad whimpering sounds and pressed close to his human friend. The alpha female seemed to understand what was happening and made soft rumbling sounds to comfort her child. But Shadow had made up its mind. When Day climbed into the shuttle, Shadow tried to follow him. The creature was too big to fit through the door, but it kept trying, making desperate sounds. "I can't leave him," Day said to the pilot. "He thinks I'm abandoning him." The pilot looked uncertain. "Sir, we cannot transport a dangerous alien creature to the Academy. The regulations clearly state." "He's not dangerous," Day said firmly, "and he's not just an alien creature. He's my friend." In the end, they had to call for a bigger shuttle. The Academy officials were not happy about it, but the video evidence was too important to ignore. They needed to study what had happened, and that meant bringing Shadow along as well. When they arrived at the Galactic Academy, news of the impossible friendship had already spread throughout the school. Students and teachers lined the landing pad to see the human who had tamed a Shadow Maw pack. But when they saw Shadow step out of the shuttle, many of them stepped back in fear. Shadow stayed close to Day, clearly nervous about all the strange new sights and smells. The young creature's red eyes darted around at all the different alien species, but remained calm because Day was calm. Professor Veltera met them at the landing pad, her 8 tentacles waving in agitation. "Kim Day," she said, "what you have done goes against everything we know about xenobiology. How do you explain this?" "Maybe the problem is not with what I did," Day answered politely. Maybe the problem is with what we thought we knew. In the professor's office later, Day presented his findings while Shadow lay curled up nearby like an enormous pet. His report was full of observations that no scientist had ever made before. He had documented Shadow Maw language, family structures, hunting cooperation, and emotional intelligence. They are not monsters, Day explained. They are people, different from us, but still people. They have families. They take care of their sick and injured. They mourn their dead. They play games and tell stories to their children. Professor Velthera reviewed the evidence with growing amazement. The video recording showed Shadow Maws working together to solve problems. The audio recordings captured complex conversations between pack members. The behavioral notes described a society as advanced as any they had studied. But why did they never show this behavior to our previous research teams? The professor asked. Because those teams came with weapons and fear. Day said simply, the Shadow Maws could sense that the researchers saw them as dangerous animals. So they acted like dangerous animals. When someone approaches you with respect and friendship, you respond with respect and friendship. Through the office window, they could see other human exchange students in the courtyard. Kim Yuna was teaching mathematics to a group of crystal beings that had previously been considered impossible to communicate with. Han Bin was sharing Earth poetry with a hive mind species, making them laugh with his funny stories about human behavior. This is becoming a pattern, Professor Velthera muttered, making notes in her report. Every human student we have had has made friends with species we considered hostile or impossible to reach. She looked up at Day, who was gently scratching Shadow behind the ear ridges. The massive creature was making happy purring sounds that filled the office with warmth. I want you to return to Vorthak Prime, the professor said finally. Not as a student, but as our official ambassador to the Shadow Maw people. Will you accept this position? Day looked at Shadow, whose 6 red eyes sparkled with excitement at the idea of going home. We accept, he said, speaking for both of them. Outside, the other professors were already planning new research projects based on what humans could teach them about making friends instead of just studying from far away.